Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
Welcome to the back of the range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg, and this is episode 79. Well, if you are like me, you are crashing after the high of the U.S. Open this past week at Pebble Beach. Man, like I said last week, primetime golf here on the East Coast. You get to play all day and then watch golf all night until 10 o'clock or so. It just doesn't get any better than that. Loved the tournament. Loved to see that Gary Woodland captured his first major championship. You know, one of the things that we haven't done with the podcast is give commentary from an editorial standpoint on the tournaments or the players on the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour. You know, I think that there's plenty of that going around. You know, some people maybe thought that Pebble Beach played a little bit too easy this year. Everyone has a point of view on Tiger and Phil and Ricky and Rory. So I really don't want to go into that. But with Gary Woodland winning the U.S. Open and the fact that we have kind of a mutual connection with the University of Kansas, I wanted to share a fun personal story. But before I get to that, let's get the podcast housekeeping stuff out of the way first. Keep following us on social media. We had a great U.S. Open giveaway contest. The winner's already been announced on Instagram. They got a hat. They're getting tees. They're getting a U.S. Open bag tag. They're getting a new towel. They're getting lots of stuff. So make sure you enter that. We're probably going to do another one for the Open Championship as well. So make sure you keep an eye on that. We're on Facebook and Twitter. The Instagram handle is the Back of the Range Podcast. All of that stuff can be found at thebackoftherange.com. Keep the reviews coming in on Apple Podcast. In all seriousness, it is really humbling to see some of your reviews, how much you're enjoying this podcast, how much it's maybe helping your game, or just the entertainment value of enjoying the great stories that are being shared by our fantastic guests. So please keep that coming and post that review up there, and you know I'll always send you something for free. Just my way of saying thanks for listening to The Back of the Range. Okay, so personal story from me, your host. So if you've been listening to the podcast for quite a long time, there is an intro episode. You can pull it up in Apple Podcasts that kind of gives you a little bit of background on myself and how this whole thing started. I played a little bit of college golf at a very small school in Miami, Florida called St. Thomas University. But before I did that, I went to KU. I have family and friends out in Lawrence, Kansas. I've been there multiple times for just about as long as I can remember. So when I left Florida to go to KU, I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could maybe walk on to the Kansas golf team? Yeah. And again, I didn't do anything in high school. I played 1 year of high school golf. But hey, when you're 18, you're not real bright, and you think, sure, you could possibly walk onto a Division I college program. So I find out who the golf coach is, and the golf coach is Ross Randall. Ross Randall was a legendary player in the PGA Tour and was a phenomenal coach at Kansas. Guess who he coached? Gary Woodland. So I find out that Ross Randall is the coach. I go to the home course, Alvamar Golf Club, and I say, Coach Randall, love KU, and I've played in high school for a year, and what's your walk-on policy? And thankfully, he was kind enough to say things like, well, Ben, we're a pretty strong team. We just won the conference last year, and we have a lot of scholarship players, and I'm just not really sure about if there's going to be room for a walk-on this year. But, practice your game and, enjoy KU, and, I wish you the best. So that's how that went. He was super kind, super nice, but basically said, yeah, you're not really what we're looking for. Well, fast forward 20 years later, I'm at my home course in Boynton Beach, and I start talking to a friend and mention my Kansas connection, family, friends. And he says, that's incredible. We have a bartender from Kansas, and, there's a guy here that's a member that helps me with my golf game, and he used to be the coach at the University of Kansas. So I said, you mean Ross Randall? His eyes light up. He's like, how do you know that name? So, of course, I share the story of how I kind of embarrassed myself as a dumb 18-year-old kid trying to walk onto the KU golf team, and he loves it. He texts Coach Randall, and takes a little while, but we finally get to meet, and he was a great friend. Unfortunately, he did pass away. He would watch me hit balls at Quail Ridge, and one of the coolest things that happened is we were playing one afternoon, and I hit a really great shot on a par 5, got there in 2, had it about 3 feet left for eagle, and as I was walking back to my cart, he says, Ben, if you were actually able to do that 20 years ago, maybe I would have put you on the KU golf team. So that was a great memory. got to know him very well, got to know his wife, Linda, very well. She actually listens to the podcast all the time. So I got a call from Linda a while back, and she says, hey, I got tickets to the KU basketball game down in Miami, and do you want to go? I said, absolutely. She's like, great, you're driving, I got the tickets. Done. Perfect. So we go down there and join the game, and sure enough, who do we see a few rows in front? Gary Woodland and his wife. So she yells out, and of course he comes up and get to meet Gary, super guy. And what does Linda do? She throws me under the bus and says, Ben, why don't you tell Gary the story of how you tried to walk on to the Kansas golf team? Really? So I got to tell a PGA Tour player, winner, and a former player on Coach Randall's team how I tried to walk onto the team. So that was pretty embarrassing, but Gary laughed quite a bit and was kind enough to kind of let me off the hook there. But thought I'd share a personal story of Kansas, meeting Gary Woodland, and sometimes when you're 18, you think you could do more than you really can. So congrats again to Gary Woodland, our U.S. Open champion. On to this week's episode. Our guest this week is no stranger to USGA events. In fact, he qualified for 4 consecutive U.S. Senior Opens. Think about that. One day a year, you have to put up the best number you can, beat everyone else in the field, and you know that it could put you into arguably the best senior tournament in the world. And you do it 4 years in a row. Our guest this week, Mike Finster, did just that. He played his college golf at Northwestern after toiling around as a pro for a few years. He got his amateur status back and has been competing on the amateur circuit for many years. We talked about his strength with the driver, which I saw firsthand at the Florida Cup last year. And, it's always nice when a senior can outdrive you by 20 yards. Really does boost the morale. He is a super guy. The stories he shared are amazing. He's also the 2019 Gasparilla Invitational champion. He's joining us this week. Mike, thanks for joining me here at the back of the range. How are you?
Ben, I am fantastic. Thank you.
I appreciate you joining me. And, before we get started, I know there's a lot we're going to get to, a lot about your amateur career that has just actually blossomed, so to speak, now that you've entered the senior ranks. But I always like talking to players about, or people on the podcast about how they get into the game and, where they grow up. And a lot of people say, well, I grew up in the Northeast and then I moved to Florida. You're just the opposite. What are you doing to me, man? You're a native of Florida, aren't you?
Actually, I was born in the Northeast, but I moved down here when I was 12 years old.
Tell me about how you got into golf, where you got started.
So my dad introduced me to the game, and I was, I grew up in my formative years until I was about 12 in New Jersey, and they had this strange rule that you had to be at least 12 years old to go on the course with as a junior.
Sure.
So I had this pilot light lit because my older brother was able to join my dad on weekends, and I, desperately wanted to join him, but I couldn't. We then moved down to Tampa, and there was a course literally around the corner from me, Rocky Point, where I wanted to play, but my dad was insistent on, I'm going to teach you the rules and the etiquette of the game before I take you out to the course. So that another 30 days goes by. So now I've got this pilot light that's raging, going, I really want to try this game. And, played all the other sports growing up, but I got bitten pretty bad by the golf bug.
So you didn't really play many other sports. I mean, this was pretty much your thing when you first got started. What was the kind of the junior golf culture or high school golf culture in St. Pete, Tampa area at that time?
Well, it's really interesting you say that because I was hitting balls right at this Skyway Park right around the corner from my house, and this guy, Rob Gainster, who started the Greater Tampa Junior Golf Association, stopped me and said, hey, I'm going to start this golf association. And again, we've had quite a few really top players, John Houston, Woody Austin, a number of female, who go on to a successful career. So that's kind of how we got started, and just to get into some competition. And I remember looking back, my first ever tournament was at Saddlebrook, and I shot 127. And then a year later, shot 73 on the same course. So, I made some pretty good improvements.
That's a big one. About 50 shots better. That's not bad. That's incredible.
Oh, I was hooked. Trust me, I remember, and I think what helped me is I learned the game from the hole backwards.
So glad you got it. I am so glad you got into that. I am so glad, because that is how I learned the game, and that's how most people do not learn the game, because they
you're exactly right. They want to bang the driver, right? And so what happened to me was, there was the men's association would have this little putting contest, and so I'd join them. I'd ride my bike up at 3:15, and we'd play 50-cent closest dollar drops, and I would clean up, and then as I remember, kind of my mom finding a wad of cash at the bottom of my sock drawer, and unbeknownst to me, she shared with my dad, and he comes down and says, "Michael, I want to have a word with you. Your mother found this," and of course they're maybe thinking the worst. And I told my dad I've been gambling the men's association, and his response was, "Son, I can't condone this, but keep up the good work."
That's awesome. So. That's so great. So I was just going to say, he had to be so proud. He was like, my kid just that's awesome. So you're picking up coin at on the putting green, on the chipping green. Did you ever really think about how much that was going to help your game, or was that just fun? And I guess, we all think about what our drills are and our technique, and we need to watch a video and go on YouTube and how do I get better? Were you even thinking about what that was doing for your golf game, or was that just being social and learning how to be an adult on a golf course with other men at the club?
Right. It was something that wasn't really consciously thought of. And again, it was just sort of, happenstance that, again, you learn to get the ball in the hole, which is ultimately obviously the goal in golf. And, this awesome game that we all play, and all your listeners, enjoy. I mean, it's a counterintuitive game, right? I mean, if you're slicing the ball to the right, you have to actually swing to the right, not left, right? If you want the ball to go up in the air, you've got to hit down on the ball to make it go up. And so I think what's happened to me, particularly in the last few years, is I've actually tried less. I've lowered my expectations. I've tried to play like I did as a kid, again, when you work for 20 some odd years, trust me, any day on the golf course is better, better than a day, at the office. But, you try to eliminate, left brain, conscious thought, just be athletic. And so that's really what's, and couple that with, I think God just has a fantastic sense of humor that I would be playing the best golf of my life, which isn't, again, compared to some of your other guys, is not that high level, but I've really been very, very blessed to have some awesome, opportunities.
Well, let's just clear that up really quickly here, because I get this sense that you think need to be on eggshells, or maybe you don't think you got the resume. Let's just clear that up really quickly. You qualified for 4 consecutive U.S. Senior Open championships through sectional qualifying. So 4 years in a row, you had to be at your best and beat a field of pros and amateurs at your spot, probably about 80 to 90 people in each qualifier. So we'll just knock that one out of the water right there. So since we're talking about it, let's talk about something like that, the U.S. Senior Open. Obviously, to be eligible for that, you got to be 50 years old. Can you kind of talk about what you were doing around the age of 45 to 50, knowing what's coming up? Were there things you did to prepare for that, knowing that you had that opportunity, on the horizon?
Ben, it's a great question. And I really had, and I've been playing, a lot of the hidden giggles, member guests, just having fun. I still thoroughly, love the game. And then the local cable company put up the sponsorship money for a spot at the Outback Pro-Am, which was a local, Champions Tour event. And
Sure.
It was just and so as luck would have it, I was able to qualify. And it probably as much due to the fact that everybody else got to play to half of their handicap, in the finals. And I was very candid with the tournament organizers. I said, look, I'm a scratch or a plus. I mean, how are you guys? No, you just go off as a 0.
Oh, okay.
So really, these poor guys got their handicaps chopped in half. And instead of me having to give a couple or 3 shots back to the field, I got to play it scratch.
Yeah, you played straight up. You played as if you played like you just had a pro as your 4-ball partner.
Exactly. And so I was fortunate enough to make it. was paired with Tom Pernice and Bob Tway the first couple of rounds, and just had a fantastic time. And these guys were very, very encouraging, and to the point that they said, why don't you try to play some stuff?
Yeah.
And I mean, but at this point, I've got a basketball team full of kids, full-time job. I mean, it's not quite going to be, in the cards to play a lot of amateur golf. But kind of an interesting, anecdote to this story is my only goal that week was to hit a Coke worthy shot. That is, Gary Koch was going to make mention of me on TV. Yes, I have ego, and I'm one of the, got to work on pride. It's one of the deadly sins here. But
sure.
Nevertheless, I hit a nice approach into the 18th hole. And for anybody that doesn't know, I mean, this is like a big cocktail party. There must be 15,000 people in the tents, just, sipping on some drinks. And so, I was lucky enough to wiggle in a birdie pot, got, one of the nicest, roars that I've ever heard. And it actually made national TV. And so the tournament wraps up, and then I get a call from the USGA that Monday asking about the circumstances for the qualifier. And I went through everything I knew. I mean, the PGA Tour had a representative at all the stages, and they said, okay, well, a viewer called in saying that if you want a spot that's valued at $12,000, that, I'm like, oh, I never even considered that. And so sure enough, I was suspended from amateur play for a year, and I wouldn't have changed it for world because, we had just a fantastic family memory. My mom was able to walk around and got to play with Hal Sutton and Emmett Smith. And unfortunately, the last day got rained out, and we were on the third green, and I am about a foot inside Hal Sutton. And he calls over an official, says, look, these greens are unputtable. And so he calls our maintenance. They squeegee him. He's like, I still can't putt. And then so Tom Pernice had asked me, he goes, Mike, do you want to come up? And I said, sure, I'll come up. And again, you can't make this stuff up. I knock it in from 30 feet. I go over to my friends and family, and I said, I don't know what Hal Sutton's bitching about. The greens are perfect. and they erupt in laughter. And I think he knew that I was going to take a little dig at him.
Yeah, I'm sure he heard that one. So that's awesome. Wow. So you basically lose your amateur status on a technicality, I guess. It certainly wasn't your intent to have that happen, but it worked out well. And it kind of sounds like it gave you the impetus to say, like, okay, I think I know what I'm going to be doing when I turn 50, or I think I know what I'm going to be shooting for. It's always the question. I'm sure it's the question you've gotten several times, many times, but what are the reasons that you wanted to stay an amateur and not pursue a life on the Champions Tour?
Well, I've been fortunate that some people have offered, but I've grown up with a lot of those guys, and they were certainly champions on the regular tour. And what's to think that you're going to have success? I mean, obviously he's a guy like Ken Tanagawa, and it's fantastic, but I'm really not in that caliber. And again, I know I have maybe a little bit of a self-deprecating streak, but again, this game will certainly humble you. And so I feel as though, like, for example, the qualifiers for the Open, I didn't realize it was just 18 holes. And you're right, it does take a little different mindset. Because obviously, you need to just play well, because it's a bit of a sprint, right? 18 holes. Sure. And yet you still need to sort of play, aggressive and avoid a big number. So, as I say, I just, caught lightning in a bottle. I think it's, obviously you have some strong, some very strong players, and you just, I wish I knew what the magic was. I can tell you this last one, which I missed just a week ago for Notre Dame, which would have been extra special and very sentimental, because my dad is a grad. I have an older brother that's a grad. I've got two daughters that are attending. So maybe, my whole philosophy, try less, it didn't quite apply. And,
sure.
But nevertheless, I mean, I fully believe this was part of God's plan, and obviously, there is disappointment, but sometimes these unanswered prayers end up working out for the best.
Yeah, you mentioned you have ties to Notre Dame. I didn't want to gloss over the fact of where you went to college or where you played collegiately, and you played at Northwestern. I'm always fascinated. I love getting into, how do people get to the college that they play at? How do these decisions get made, and what were their experiences like? So from a kid that lived in Florida for most of his childhood and then goes up to the Midwest, how did Northwestern get on your radar?
Well, it was again just a very I call it a godcidence, not a coincidence, but a good friend. I mean, I had no intentions of traveling, north of the Mason-Dixon line. I mean, yes, I was a young aspiring, wannabe pro, and what's the best, venue, school that could, maybe help you achieve those goals. But I ended up going on a recruiting visit, and it was as a result of Chuck Winship, who was the coach at University of Tampa at the time, and he knew me as a kid growing up, and he says, "Listen, I know the coach up there. I think it'd be a good fit for you." And so, sure enough, went up, fell in love with the school, the players, the coach Wally Goodwin, who went on to coach some guy Eldrick out in Stanford, and as a matter of fact, I went out to his Hall of Fame induction, in the fall, which was just fantastic. Here he is still doing great at 90 years old, and so it was one of those things, Ben, where it was just the right fit, and the courses that we played on were just fantastic. 4 of the 6 that hosted the U.S. Open at one point. So it was just a perfect match. And I coming off, obviously, living in Florida, I literally golfed every day for like 5 years. I mean, I'd say, hey, I'm going to play in the wind and the rain, because at some point, you're going to have to play in the wind and the rain. So, maybe a little bit of burnout. And so having a couple months off in the winter wasn't such a bad idea. And we had a great team. One of my teammates, Frank Quinn, is still playing on the Champions Tour. Another, Jim Benepe, won his first ever PGA start in the Western Open. And I'm still close. Matter of fact, I talked to another teammate of mine just this morning, Mike Stone. So it was just a great group of guys, and we went from 26 consecutive years last place in the Big Tens. And when I say last, we were last by like 30, almost by as many shots as Oklahoma State just won this one. But we were the cellar dwellers. And then we ended up finishing third and second, and, really turned the program, in the right direction. And of course, the current Pat Goss and David Inglis at Northwestern now have really taken it to another level where they've been actually contending for the NCAAs.
Now, do you head back to Northwestern at all do you have any involvement with the team or the program at all now? I know a lot of alums at different, universities go back, or they're still involved. Are you still involved with Northwestern at all?
I am. And I'm so grateful to Pat and Dave for including the alums, because again, you want to share whatever you can with the current team. And so they would host an alumni match versus, the current team. And again, these guys are living large. I mean, they're flying down on weekends, to practice down in Jupiter. And Luke Donald's been nice enough to host, some of these challenge matches. And I might just have to make mention that we're 12 for 12. And it's not like Luke Donald's playing every year, but I mean, the old men are beating the young whippersnappers, and I hope that pokes some of them to keep working at it. But and I really had an awesome opportunity. We had our major fundraiser this past fall, and Coach Goss had asked me to come up and would I help out with a clinic, and Jim Benepe was going to be there, and Kirk Triplett, because Kirk's son Sam was a player on the team, and then ironically another son of his, Connor, went to Notre Dame. So he and I have, had a nice 4-year run of practice rounds at the Senior Open. But I'm getting off tangent here. So
you're good.
As we're all together Sunday night, Kirk Triplett says, "Hey, Pat said Luke is going to be at the fundraiser tomorrow." I'm like, "Huh?" No. This is not going to work. I will gladly step away. I will watch. Luke Donald hit some balls instead of
sure.
It was this guy Finster. But we ended up having just a great day. And Luke invited us back to his house to watch the Bears game and get a tour of the trophy room. It was just a fantastic opportunity and a great memory.
Yeah, well, that's he's pretty much at the top of the list when you think of Northwestern golf. So you mentioned Kirk Triplett's son and I know you have kids. You have 4 girls and you have a boy. Is that correct?
I have 3 girls. A 15-year-old boy and then a 9-year-old boy. So I have, and what I like to say is I have 4 great kids and 1, and this way it keeps them all on their toes. Cause I'm like, I don't know, would I be talking about you? I mean,
you're terrible.
I know. No dad of the year for me. That's for sure.
Wow. That's rough. That's rough going. So, how have you introduced the game to your kids? Like, is that part of their life, or is that just dad's weird thing he does and he just disappears on some weekends?
Yeah. Funny story. So I was trying a little reverse psychology with my girls, saying, hey, golf's too hard a sport, thinking that might, prod them to, I'll show you, but wow. No, it didn't work. They all became very, very good swimmers. And then, my son, played a little bit, but not so much. And then, as irony would have it, our youngest is one who's definitely shown some interest, and he loves going out on weekends and hitting chips and putts. And so, yeah, that's been, because that's been a dream of mine, is to have, one of your kids come up to you, and again, because that was my experience, it was never one of these, dad or mom forcing you to go practice. It was something that they just encouraged us. And I didn't want to push. I look back maybe with a little bit of regret, saying I wish I maybe would have just forced them to take some lessons to get the foundation. And then if they want to, park it for a decade or so, that's fine.
Yeah.
But now, so that's kind of how that's how it happened. But I speaking about my youngest, we actually were at dinner a couple months ago, celebrating some of my kids' very, very strong academic accomplishments. And again, I just want to highlight that it's definitely from my wife. She's definitely the.
No one's going to find that hard to believe, Finster. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. But who knows me? So here we are with a fancy restaurant in Tampa, and I'm waiting to pay the check, and I hear this guy talking to my youngest, complimenting him on his attire and what a firm handshake. And I'm thinking, who is this character talking to my kid? And so I look back, and lo and behold, it's a Hall of Fame hockey player who's going to be on TV tonight calling Game 5 of the Stanley Cup.
Sure.
I'm thinking, wow, what are the odds of this? So we just started small talk, and I said, wow, that was really nice. The family had already gone to sit down at the table. And so he has no idea that I golf at all. But he pulls out his phone and he says, hey, I'm playing this course, Palmachia. You ever heard of it? I'm like, yeah, it's Palmachia. You'll love it. It's a great, great track. Donna Ross. And he goes, yeah. And then the other one is Tampa Palms. I go, man, you got a great lineup. So I sit down to dinner and I shoot the head pro, Kevin Kenny, who's a buddy, a note saying, hey, I met one of your guests who's coming out on Sunday. And he says, yeah, it's going to be great, but I wrenched my back and I can't play. Would you mind standing in for me? I said, are you kidding me? I'd be honored. And so I do a quick Wikipedia search, and, this guy's talking about how when he was a kid, Gordie Howe threw some ice over the glass and winked at him, and the amount of impact, it had on an impressionable young man. And so he makes a point at restaurants to do the same things to these young kids. And I'm like, man, that's exactly what happened to us.
Yeah.
So we get reacquainted on the first tee, and just thinking, wow, this is just going to be fantastic. And then he looks at me, and again, he still doesn't know that I golf at all. He just knows that I have a set of clubs, and I showed up at this, very, very nice country club. And he said, I like playing for an amount that makes a guy uncomfortable.
Oh boy.
What amount is that for you? So I respond, well, listen, you're a scratch golfer, I understand, and I don't want to take any shots. So I was thinking, how about a $100 Nassau, and I'll bet you 500 I beat you. And he buckles over laughing. He goes, "That's the funniest line I've ever heard." And I said, "No, let's do this." And so first hole, I rattled the flag, damaged the cup. I birdied 3 of the first 5. He's like, "Okay, I'm buying out of that bet. I need double Tito's stat." So we get him some vodka, and then we have another bet. I end up winning that. And then on about the 11th hole, he hits into this group of there's 2 couples that are playing on a Sunday morning.
Oh, no.
And they come back nice as can be. Guys, we can't go anywhere. And this guy goes Dr. Jekyll on him. I mean, he's ready to drop the gloves, and I can see why he spent some time in the penalty box. And he starts having words with them. And I'm trying to diffuse the situation, going, this is really not happening, right? And so anyway, we ended up playing a couple more holes. And at this point, after he was still chirping at these the members, I said, let's just call this a day. And so anyway, that was a kind of crazy experience here just a couple months ago.
Yeah, and it's funny how that started from just a purely innocent interaction at a restaurant where he's complimenting your kid. So
yeah, and talking to some guys who knew this player, they said that it is kind of it is common, and even once you say his name, it's like, let me guess.
Yeah. Oh,
there was
okay.
gambling, drinking, and fighting involved. I said, yeah, in that order. How did you know? So yeah,
nice. We glossed over the Senior Open, which I really did not want to do. But before we do get to that, I did want to kind of talk to you about the fact that you did play professionally out of college, and of all places, how does Woody Austin and the Japan Golf Tour ever find themselves in the same sentence?
Well, again, I am a firm believer that God is writing a story, and He has a plan for us. And I'm with my now wife.
Even for Woody Austin, he has a plan. I mean, really?
I know. I'm telling you, Woody is one of a kind. He is, without a doubt. The mold was broken after Woody. But here, I was he was tending bar in Tampa, and I'm with Mary Beth, my wife. Again, we were just friends back then, and I had just come back from playing a 3-month circuit in South Africa. That was kind of the extent of after I graduated college. My folks were like, look, if you want to give this a whirl, we'll be happy to fund this. And so modest success, making a couple or 3 cuts. I'm thinking, look, I'm just not good enough. There's no shame in this. So there's Woody. He's like, well, what are you going to do next? And I said, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. And as I'm sitting here now talking to you, Ben, I'm 54, and I'm still not exactly sure what I'm going to do with my life. But nevertheless, I said, maybe law school, grad school. I'm not 100% sure. And he mentions that he had met a money guy out of Japan who sent him over to qualify through the Japanese tour school. And he's looking for another American. And did I have any interest? And this particular guy had a golf academy in Tampa, and the high school players and kind of aspiring pros could attend, and they'd have instruction. So sure enough, I played 9 holes of golf, had a sushi dinner, and inked a 5-year deal. And he picked up all the expenses. My first experience in Japan, I flew there, played 18 holes, and came back. Oh, and I was like, man, that's got to be some kind of crazy record. But it was, for a young guy, just a fantastic opportunity. And back in the day, I mean, the economy, the golf tour was really booming in Japan. So it was just just a really great opportunity for to try to improve my skills. But I then wrapped that up, came back, tried the USPGA school, made it to the second stage, missed, and at that point I said, look, it's time to maybe start
earning a living, getting a job,
earning a living. Yeah, exactly, because I had truly been living a very
the gypsy life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was still living at my parents' crib, which isn't really very good for a 30-year-old guy, after but so yeah, no, that was, as I say, it was just And it was a great, very, very competitive tour. And again, a lot of U.S. players, PGA players, would go over in towards the end of the year just because the prize money was so strong.
Yeah. So back then it wasn't actually, I guess now it feels that, the web.com is the way that these guys get onto the PGA Tour. They may bounce around for Latin America or for Mackenzie or different things like that, but they all seem to want to try and come back to the web to kind of get through Q School. So did you see guys that were just making that their living with no desire to really get elsewhere, or was that more of a jumping off spot? What was it like back then?
Yeah, so it was, you had to go through the same type of setup here in the U.S., 2 4 round qualifiers, and then the finals was 6. And you would see guys that were playing on the Asian circuit. There was a little bit in South America. But as far as like truly a viable, I mean, it was really the European tour, the Japanese tour. And I missed the first go round at the finals. I mean, it was kind of the strange thing where you had to shoot 10 over par or better or finish in the top 25. And in this particular finals, it actually snowed. And so only one guy, Ricky Kawaguchi, he was the only guy that made it. So that was kind of just bad luck. But, talking about Woody, and again, he's a super talented player, and I just give him full credit for just sticking to it. The guy really was a bank teller at, the credit union that I was a member of, and he just kept fighting and sticking with it. And he shot 88, 92, 93 in the finals of the qualifying school, and then just flew home, skipped the last day. But I'm thinking, stick a fork in him. I mean, he's done. How do you ever come back from something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did, he just kept working at it. And so, it was something that, again, you got to see and play with, a lot of the top players, and, you'd see, Faldo and Norman come over for some of the bigger events. But yeah, my pro career was, if you were looking at lifetime money, I'm definitely in the bottom 5. I mean, I just had a golden goose who was paying the bills.
Well, if you're playing on that tour and you have all that travel, I am sure you have some sort of a travel story that you can share from back in the day.
I did have kind of one, incident where, once out of every 5 times going through customs and immigration, they would open up your golf bag and your suitcase just to make sure you're not bringing in any contraband or whatever. And so I had received a call from a guy who was already over in Japan. Would I mind bringing over some magazines, that are really known for their articles, let's just say, and, the reading materials.
Very artistic is what you're saying.
Artistic, exactly. Well put. So at this point, I'm like, sure, no problem. So, so I stuffed them in my bag. And when this is my time to get my bags rifled through. And so here they are holding up these, October magazine, and I'm getting the no. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I turned a shade of red like you have never seen in your life.
Uh-huh.
So when I finally see this player, I tell them, look, I got caught bringing in your contraband. And then he proceeds to tell me, like, oh yeah, I meant to call you back. My mom actually FedExed them to me, so I didn't need them after all. And I thought to myself, man, that is just a conversation I'm not having with my mom. You know what I mean?
You're a devout Christian that just got busted and trying to smuggle smut into a foreign country.
Yeah, that's me. That's me.
That's perfect.
Oh boy,
couldn't have been a nicer guy.
Unreal.
That's great. All right, so I want to ask you. So we've played golf recently together. We played in the Florida Cup back last October.
Yeah, St. Augustine.
Yeah, somewhere in there. So we played Hammock Creek, and we're paired. We're playing the 4-ball portion of the tournament, and so I'm about 42 and you're 53, so you're about 10 years older than me, and you were consistently knocking it by about 10 to 20 yards past me, and I wouldn't consider that I'm a short hitter, but sure did feel like one on that day. So I'm curious, distance is a big part of your game. I know that in several of the U.S. Senior Opens that you played in, you were right at the top of the driving distance category. I think you led one of them with Grant Waite. So you are consistently, hitting it you're averaging about 300 yards. So for the person that's trying to improve that part of their golf game, what is your advice? What are your tips? How do you hit the ball? And can it be taught? Can it be learned?
Well, I've always had a short backswing, and I know it seems like that's kind of coming in vogue. And, it's interesting. You hear some of these analysts on TV saying, oh, he has such a long, fluid swing, he's going to be able to play forever.
Right.
But, my thought is I've always been short. I'm still short, on the backswing. And I haven't found, really any loss. And obviously, with equipment and ball, I'm still able to kind of move it out there. I think when people ask me, hey, do you have any advice? And I say, look, I feel you have to use, keep obviously everything loose. It's kind of like a fastball pitcher, right? I mean, if you have, rigid wrists or anything, and, you have to be able to snap the ball, right at the proper moment. And
sure.
So I think that's really what's helped me. I mean, the timing's sort of been there. I didn't really take lessons growing up. And, I find that, I sometimes kind of, get a little too, methodical. I when I'm playing my best, I'm singing a U2 song in my head, and, let's just go have, let's just be athletic. It's a ball, it's a hole, it's a game. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so, I think that we've certainly, made it a lot more difficult. So, yeah, I mean, that would be kind of my thing is just, let the, the wrist snap, you know what I mean? Right at impact.
Are you an equipment guy? Are you constantly tinkering, getting on TrackMans, testing out shafts, heads? Is that something that is part of your ability to stay consistently longer than maybe your competition, or is that just over complicating things? You just find a driver you like it and you're good.
Yep. No, that's exactly it, Ben. I mean, I probably know the least about equipment as anybody out there, although I did take the Rory challenge and bought an M driver thinking, okay, if this Irishman wins the PGA, I get a free club. But,
sure.
I did recently, a dear friend of mine, ended up putting me in some PXG saying, hey, listen, I want to put you in, in some of the best equipment, and let's see what you can do. And that's been fantastic, because I can tell you, when you do go through kind of a fitting and you try some different shafts and lofts, it really is. But I am really not that type of, what degrees and what's my launch angle, the TrackMan guy. No, that's just not me.
That's just not you. Okay. So, Mike, I want to ask you this question. We've all played our casual practice rounds or casual games on Saturdays with, 2 off the first. Everyone likes the breakfast ball. Or whenever you'd pump one OB or you pump one in the water, you drop that second ball or you tee up that second ball, and, of course, we all know what happens. You stripe it down the middle. Or when we're on the putting green and, of course, you miss that 12-footer because you hit a terrible putt, then you rake it back, hit it again, and you drain it without thinking. So can you speak to maybe some of your experiences with that, of how maybe that second Mike Finster is always better than the first Mike Finster?
Well, you're right. I think it's a phenomenon that everybody's sort of experienced. And, I try to take it a little bit further, like, why is it that second guy, second ball Sam, I mean, drops it, pures it, flushes it. And, I was a little bit of a psycho on the greens. I mean, I've tried left-handed putting. I was putting with the back of a right-handed ping putter, left-handed. I mean, trust me, that sounds hard. I was desperate. I mean, you were really running out of options at that point. But I had this sort of epiphany saying, I was watching this young man, 12 years old, on the putting green, just one ball, knocking it in, grabbing it out of the cup, hitting the next one. I'm thinking, man, am I making this harder? So again, it kind of goes to that, what we were discussing about trying less. And, what that second guy, right, the outcome at that point doesn't matter. So, again, I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express. So this is just kind of through 30 years of trial and error and And, when you play golf once every 10 days or so, and, you've got a full-time job,
Sure.
that lowering those expectations, I think would really help everybody. And that's, to me, again, there is no secret, as we all know. But I think if we would all kind of take that approach, like it really doesn't matter the outcome. And when you really try too hard in this, wonderfully challenging game, it usually doesn't turn out well for anybody.
So you mentioned people come up to you to ask, get advice or to kind of pick up tips and tricks. Now, for the last 4 years, I know you're not going to be there this year, but for the last 4 years, you've been basically spending a week at the top of senior golf at the U.S. Senior Open. So do you go into that? I know you want to compete. You've made the cut, I think, 2 or 3 times. I know you want to go in there and compete, but are you going in there to kind of maybe pick up a couple things, maybe in a practice round, or just to kind of open your eyes to the best in the world, see if you can add something from their game to your game?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, I've been really so blessed to have such, just great family memories. And I've got some dear friends that have been making the trips with us. And we, it's definitely not about me. You know what I mean? These particular weeks are just so special. And, if I could just kind of set the stage, I mean, again, the first one, I had no idea really what to expect. And, you fly into California and there's somebody greeting you there, volunteer, and they're helping with your bags, and they hand you these brand new Lexus keys, and they got the GPS, already set to the course, and you arrive and you register, and then they turn this, computer monitor to your, hey, did you want to play a practice round?
Oh, yeah.
Today? I'm like, yeah, that'd be fantastic. And then up is all the players. And, the first one I'm thinking, oh, Tom Lehman, David Frost. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, go ahead, throw me in with those guys.
Yeah, why not?
So that was, that was my initial, go round. And, everybody to a man has been just fantastic. And, these guys, I think once they found out I was an amateur, they were kind of, being maybe a little bit more forthcoming, like, hey, there'd probably be a big pin here, and, watch for this. So that was a really cool experience. And then, as I mentioned, I used to live down in Boca, and my caddy, Mike Copeland, great friend, he was the kind of guy who said, listen, it's not if, but when you make it, I want to be on your bag. I mean, it was kind of, it was one of those things. It was just so awesome. So he's out there, and talking to David Frost, he said that he's building a house in Boca. And Mike works for another good friend of mine, Pete Kessel, who owns a roofing company. He said, listen, we'll do the job at cost. So now we're exchanging cell phone numbers,
Sure.
In my first ever practice round. I'm like, this is unbelievable. So then I thought, listen, how about a little quid pro quo? David, I could use a little help, putting in bunkers. And he goes, go ahead, get in the bunker. Let me see your action. So I'm hitting some shots, and he goes, your technique's fine. He goes, but you have too much bounce on your wedge. Here, try my club. So, and I'm thinking, wow, this is unbelievable. And so it's the same thing on the putting green. He goes, you need to get your putter bent to 71 degrees and blah, blah, blah. And again, that's not my kind of game.
You don't know what the hell he's talking about.
Right. But if that's what he says, he goes, go down to the vans. They'll take care of you. So the next day I'm walking into the locker room, and sure enough, there's David Frost, and he's standing at the urinal, and he goes, hey, Mike, did you get your clubs fixed like I asked? And I said, yeah, I sure did. And as I walked by, pat him on the shoulder, say, thank you very much. And then it quickly occurred to me, as I look back, and I said, David, I promise you, that's the last time I ever touch you while you have your unit in your hand. he starts laughing. He goes, yeah, Crenshaw did the same thing to Nicholas back when he was a rookie. But it was just fantastic. And again, I've been so fortunate. I mean, I've played with Monty, Woosnam, Maggart, as I mentioned, Kirk Triplett, Olin Brown, Fed Frank. I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, it's
Sure.
just, I kind of like, I'm gonna single in on playing with some of the top pros. And this last year at the Broadmoor was extra special because, again, I was trying to I got an opportunity to play with Bernard Langer and Larry Mize.
Oh,
and
gosh.
I know, right? Come on, I mean, Dorothy, I'm a long way from Kansas here. I mean, this is as good as it gets. And so the fourth player is Mike McCoy, who's just a fantastic golfer. Won the Mid-Am, just a super guy. And I've gotten to know him a little bit over the over the years. And I strap on, two pairs of 2-unders because I'm like, okay, I'm going to get nervous here today. And
Sure.
Which is great because it's the Wednesday before. And so my caddy and I decided, we're going to go through the round as if it's actually the tournament, go through our routine and line up every putt. And so I noticed that Mike is doing the same thing. And so I just kind of mentioned, hey, do you want to do like a little birdie game for this 9? He goes, sure, that'd be great. And so I'm having, a career 9 holes with these guys. And then about the 5th hole, I'm about 20 yards ahead of the guys off the tee, and the head pro comes up and he says, hey, Mike, would you mind if I introduce you to the owners of the Broadmoor? There's Philip and Nancy Anschutz. I'm thinking, huh? Yeah, that'd be fine. And then it quickly occurred to me, maybe it's the guys behind me that they want to meet.
Yeah.
But, we exchanged pleasantries, could not have been nicer. And, we carry on. And then on about the 8th hole, it's a par 3. I hit a nice approach shot. It looked like it almost went in. And this is in front of, some friends and family. And Bernard Langer says to me, I'm kind of tired of saying, nice shot, Mike. Nice shot, Mike. Now I'm thinking, pinch me. I mean, my week at that point is done. I don't even care what I do in the tournament. And then almost eagle the last hole, the 9th. And Langer says to me, so you sell roofing material, huh? Because you could probably make a pretty good living out here, And it was just fantastic. And then in the locker room, he kind of pulled me aside and he said, I look forward to playing golf with you on Sunday afternoon. Which again,
man,
yeah, I mean, stop, right? I mean, I can't make this up. And again, I will be sure to take advantage of the sacrament of reconciliation for my lack of humility. But I mean, it was just one of those kind of classic, you know, is this really happening to me? And so that was just a fantastic memory. And I guess I have a bunch, but I'm not going to bore your listeners. But
no, my listeners like being bored with stories like this, so you're doing well. I was actually going to cut you off and ask you this question: if you had to pick one of the guys that you played with in any of these practice rounds or even some of the regulation rounds, and you got a special exemption to go play at the top of the rock, the par 3 tournament up there in Branson, who would you pick to be your partner? And I know that's a really tough one because you can go skill level, or you can go fun level, or you can go both. But
right. No, good question. I would say, for me, the unicorn, and I've really tried to get it paired up with, has been Miguel Angel Jimenez, and it's just for kind of the way, the guy, right, the most interesting man, and just he seems to enjoy the game, and obviously his skill level is phenomenal, and but it has not happened, and who knows if it ever will, but I'm fine either way. But the closest it came was we were up in Scioto at dinner, and I understand this is kind of what I mean about this guy. He apparently calls the tournament directors at each one of the stops and says, hey, what are some of the finest restaurants in town? And then he has his grape shipped to the restaurant so that he can drink his own wine. And I'm thinking, now this is fantastic, right?
That guy's a baller.
So there he is sitting at a table, and there's about, 12 of us at our table, kind of guys on one side, girls on the other, just like back in kindergarten. And he gets up to leave, and a good friend of mine tugs him by his shirt and says, Miguel, hey, I just want to let you know this is your competition this week. And then he looks at me, and I'm thinking, oh, no, an amateur roofing salesman is not his competition. I'm like, oh. And so then he looks at me, and he says, you have a very nice table here, looking at the ladies.
Of course.
And he says, but this side, not so much.
Oh,
And,
awesome.
I mean, the guy was he's just got a ton of personality. Saw him the next day in the locker room, and he shot 68 with no bogeys at Scioto. And I'm just telling you, if I had 2 balls scramble and I bought a couple mulligans, there's no way I'm going around, with no bogeys. And he goes, yeah, I only made 2 birdies. I left many for you on the course. And I'm thinking, wow,
what
this
an
guy's,
ass.
yeah. But he's, like I said, he's just, I would say, yeah, that would be my guy I'd like to play with.
Nice. So I know that family, obviously anyone that's paying attention here in this episode, they know that family is very important. They know your faith is very important. You've had your family out to the U.S. Senior Open. So I know that, taking care of your kids and supporting them in their endeavors. You mentioned your daughters are swimmers, but you've had them in your gallery, so to speak, at some of these events, haven't you?
I sure have. It's as I mentioned, it's really been just a family. Instead of doing vacations, we've had some awesome places to go. Boston and California, but we also look at it as an opportunity. I mean, as you know, golf is a little bit of a microcosm of life. You're
Sure.
faced with adversity, and how do you respond to that? And I think back the first round, first tournament, I was doing well. I was like even par through 15. And then I don't even know what happened, because I don't even feel like I really hit a bad shot, but I ended up finishing double bogey, double bogey, double bogey.
Oh.
And, one of my girls was nearly in tears. Another one was in the fetal position. And I'm thinking, okay, obviously I was disappointed, like, what just happened? Welcome to the U.S. Open type of, mentality. But I said, guys, come on. I tried my best. Let's go have a nice dinner. And, I'm still the same guy I was as if I would have parted him.
Yeah.
So that particular night, Ben, I'm telling you, my wife she was unbelievable. I mean, just saying the right things. It's like, look, how you handle yourself is more important than your score. And so I am telling you, the next day I come out and I don't know what happened, but I was in fuego. I'm 4 under through 7. And if I could have wiggled in a 4-footer, I'd have been 5 under through 7. And, we're right on the cut line, finish early, and like 15 times, in the cut line, outside the cut line. I mean, in each one of these is like a slow death.
Yeah. Of course.
And again, my wife, she doesn't know a bogey or birdie's better, but she's like, what do you mean? This means is if you're in on the weekend or you're out. I'm like, yeah, babe, this is important.
Oh,
we really, and unfortunately a guy double bogeyed the last hole, which allowed us to make the cut, on the first year, which was pretty fantastic. And so Sunday morning, yeah, I might have been a dew sweeper. I am on the tee, and it happens to be my wife and I's anniversary. And like any good salesman, if you don't ask for the order, you're never going to get it. So right. I just said, look, is there any chance of maybe throwing a happy anniversary, Mary Beth, sign up on one of the scoreboards? And he's like, you know what, congratulations, but I don't think we can do that, but let me make a call. So he does, and it comes back again, congratulations, but we're not going to be in a position to go, no problem.
Yeah.
So off we go. We're making the turn at 9, and then the USGA official starts walking towards me. And I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? And he says to me, Mike, your first tee request is going to be honored. And I mean, at this point, I'm kind of in the middle of the round. I'm like, what?
What?
And then it quickly occurred to me. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I can't wait to play the rest. Yeah. And so we get to the 16th green. The official that's walking with us waves to my wife to come underneath the ropes,
right,
and calls her out onto the green.
Oh, wow.
And then shows her happy anniversary, Mary Beth. The crowds gave us a standing ovation, and I'm telling you, it's a memory that I'm going to cherish forever.
That's awesome.
And it was a hard one to follow up the following anniversary year. Flowers didn't quite cut it, but
should have had a card in there signed from the USGA. So that would have been perfect if you did.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, before we close out the episode, you are the reigning Gasparilla Invitational champion. This is a very, very historic It's a very historic tournament in Tampa, Florida. I think it's probably, 55, 56 years now they've had this tournament. It started as a professional tournament way back in the day. It transitioned to an amateur tournament. It is probably in that circle of, probably that circle of 6 or circle of 10 mid-amateur tournaments in the country that gets the most, attention. You got the Coleman, you have the Thomas, the Gasparilla is definitely at that level, or getting to that level, so to speak. So you won it this year. I know you've had many close calls. When did you first start playing in the Gasparilla?
Well, interesting. I've only probably played it a handful of times just because I wasn't living in the area. And you're right. It is a fantastic tournament. And you're right. The field has been improving, year after year. I mean, it really had, kind of very, very preeminent status years ago. And they've certainly brought that back. But so I've been runner up, or as my youngest daughter would say, first loser 4 times.
That's
and
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's one of those things, if at the beginning of the week, would you take second, you'd say yes almost every time. But some have been, some tough losses. I mean, one was to to a Florida State stud who, ends up going pro, and they've since said, look, we got to keep this thing mid-am. So that was that might have been my year.
Right.
And then the year before last, some guy, Mark Dull.
Oh, that guy.
That guy ends up reeling off 5 birdies in the last 8 holes, when I think I got that one in the bag. And I'm thinking, all right. And so I really didn't see it coming this year, because I think I was trailing by 7, going in the last day. And obviously these guys are playing well. I mean, it's not like I was playing poorly, but, they were really, I'm just, again, shocked at the caliber of play, in pretty much every channel of the game, whether it's, junior, mid-am, college. I mean, it's just, I'm really glad I'm not trying to make a living at it. But again, just got really, really fortunate. And I have to say, I think, the membership at Palmacia is just fantastic. I think they've almost adopted me in some sense, because, I've had some tough losses, but I mean, there's several hundred people, following, and they've just been beyond fantastic to me. So it was such a special, win, because, truthfully, other than winning a couple member guests, I haven't won a tournament since junior college days. I mean, this is, and it does take, a little bit something to get you into the, into the winner's circle. I mean, like I said, it was really very, very fortunate to have, kind of a career last day. And along with that, I've been really, really fortunate to have an opportunity to play down in your neck of the woods at Seminole, which is what a fantastic experience that was.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, some of the firmest, fastest greens, and we played in 25-mile-an-hour winds in different directions, and just, getting to know some of these, some of the top, mid-ams in the country has just been an unbelievable blessing.
Before we wrap up the episode, what are your plans for the rest of the year? I know that you missed U.S. Senior Open qualifier a couple weeks ago. I wish I would have had you on before you did that, because maybe get a little mojo and a little good luck going your way, but we'll get that straightened out for next year. What are your plans for the rest of the year?
So I've got the Florida Open, which will be in July. Unfortunately, I have a work conflict, and I couldn't play at the amateur, which would have been nice. And I've been playing a couple of FSG events, and full kudos to them to keep everybody competitively sharp. And
Sure.
They have the Southeastern Challenge, which is coming up later in the fall. So I'd like to kind of play a couple events and try to keep earning some points and see if I can earn a spot on that team. Because I mean, as I'm sure you would attest, I mean, the Florida Cup that we were in together, I mean, that was just fantastic, and the camaraderie and it's just as I say, just great guys, and the fact that they play golf well is just an added bonus. But just super people.
Sounds like you have a great summer and a great 2019 in store. I know there's a lot of things on the horizon, and then before you know it, you'll be prepping for next year and for another run at the U.S. Senior Open. We'll definitely keep our eye on you. I know a lot of our listeners are going to enjoy this episode, so we'll do it again soon, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me here at the Back of the Range.
Thank you, Ben. All the best, my friend.
And there you have it. Another great episode here at the Back of the Range. Special thanks to Mike Finster for joining us this week. He is actually going to go over across the pond and try and qualify for the Senior Open Championship, so we wish you luck. Mojo activated for you, sir. Don't forget, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All that information is available at thebackoftherange.com. We'll see you next week for another episode here at the Back of the Range.